Hello, we're here to speak about this book, My Year of Rest and Relaxation by Otessa Moshfegh. This is a book that has gotten a lot more popular since the pandemic, understandably. Um, Big on book talk, and I'd been wanting to read it for a while, and I did. I finally did. And I definitely knew I needed to talk about it when I read it. Um, this is a story about a young woman in her late 20s, at the turn of the millennium in New York City, who lives a life of relative privilege, waspy upper class background, um, and yet is dejected in a way that she seems unable or unwilling to understand. And so hatches a plan of safety to tranquilize herself for one calendar year, to sleep and have her year of rest and relaxation. This book is very funny. This book is very sad. A lot of people have said that the narrator of this book is awful or unlikable or just trying to be the worst, all things like that. Um, I think that there is a lot of. I think that this is not a. I think that the problem is that this is very clearly to me not a book that everyone is going to like. This is not a book meant for universal acclaim. Um, I think that this is a book that a very specific subset of people who have suffered in ways similar to the narrator of this book will find an incredible amount of solace within. I want to start by reading a excerpt. It's going to be a little long. And this is fairly early in the book. We're starting on page 30, where she's talking about her only serious long-term romantic partner that she's ever had is a guy named Trevor, who is older than her. I think he's like at least around 10 years older than her. Who she sort of sees off and on for almost for since she starts college up through the period of the book, and she's just sort of talking about him and what she sees in him. And this part, I thought, this was the first time. This happened a couple times. I listened to this book on audio. I read it and I listened to it both. Audio was very good. There was a part. This was the first time when I almost crashed my car because I was doing deliveries and I was in a parking lot at like an apartment complex, and I was laughing so hard that I almost hit someone's car. Over the next 8 years, after the first time he broke up with her and then they got back together, Trevor would periodically deplete his self-esteem in relationships with older women, i.e. women his age, and then return to me to reboot. I was always available. I dated guys from time to time, but there was never another real boyfriend, if I could even call Trevor that. He wouldn't have agreed to carry that title. There were plenty of one-night stands in college while we were on the outs, but nothing worth repeating. After I graduated and was flung into the world of adulthood, already orphaned, her parents die when she was in college, I was bolder in my desperation and made frequent appeals to Trevor to take me back. I could hear his cock harden on the phone whenever I called to beg him to come over and hold me. I'll see if I can squeeze it in, he'd say, and then he'd be there, and I'd shiver in his arms like the child I still was, swoon with gratitude for his recognition, savor the weight of him in the bed next to me. It was as though he were some divine messenger, my soulmate, my savior, whatever. Trevor would be very pleased to spend the night at my apartment on East 84th Street, earning back all the bravado he'd lost in his last affair. I hated seeing that come on in him. One time he said he was afraid of fucking me too passionately because he didn't want to break my heart. So, he fucked me efficiently, selfishly, and when he was done, he would get dressed and check his pager, comb his hair, kiss my forehead, and leave. I asked Trevor once, if you could only have blowjobs or only intercourse for the rest of your life, which one would you choose? Blowjobs, he answered. That's kind of gay, isn't it? I said, to be more interested in mouths than pussies. He did not speak to me for weeks. But Trevor was 6'3". He was clean and fit and confident. I would choose him 1,000,000 times over the hipster nerds I'd see around town and at the gallery, the art gallery where she works. In college, the art history department had been rife with that specific brand of young male, an alternative to the mainstream frat boys and preemed straight and narrow guys. These scholarly, charmless, intellectual brats dominated the more creative departments. As an art history major, I couldn't escape them. Dudes reading Nietzsche on the subway, reading Proust, reading David Foster Wallace, jotting down their brilliant thoughts into a black moleskin pocket notebook. Beer bellies and skinny legs, zip-up hoodies, navy blue peacoats or army green parkas, New Balance sneakers, knit hats, canvas tote bags, small hands, hairy knuckles, maybe a deer head tattooed across a flabby bicep. They rolled their own cigarettes, didn't brush their teeth enough, spent $100 a week on coffee. They would come into Ducat, the gallery that I ended up working at, with their younger, usually Asian girlfriends. An Asian girlfriend means the guy has a small dick, Riva, her best friend, once said. I'd hear them talk shit about the art. They lamented the successes of others. They thought that they wanted to be adored, to be influential, celebrated for their genius, that they deserved to be worshipped. But they could barely look at themselves in the mirror. They were all on Klonopin, that was my guess. They mostly lived in Brooklyn, another reason I was glad to live on the Upper East Side. Nobody up there listened to the Moldy Peaches. Nobody up there gave a shit about irony, or Dogma 95, or Klaus Kinski. The worst was that those guys tried to pass off their insecurity as sensitivity, and it worked. They would be the ones running museums and magazines, and they'd only hire me if they thought that I might fuck them. But when I had been at parties with them, or out at bars, they would ignore me. They were so self-serious and distracted by their conversation with their look-alike companions that you would think they were wrestling with a decision of such high stakes the world might explode. They couldn't be distracted by pussy, they would have me believe. The truth was probably that they were just afraid of vaginas, afraid that they would fail to understand one as pretty and pink as mine, and they were ashamed of their own sensual inadequacies, afraid of their own dicks, afraid of themselves. So they focused on abstract ideas and developed drinking problems to blot out the self-loathing that they preferred to call existential ennui. It was easy to imagine those guys masturbating to Chloe Savini, to Selma Blair, to Lili Sobieski, Winona Ryder. Trevor probably masturbated to Britney Spears, or Janis Joplin. I never understood his duplicity. And Trevor had never wanted to kneel at the altar. I could count the number of times he had gone down on me on one hand. When he'd tried, he had no idea what to do, but seemed overcome by his own generosity and passion, as though delaying getting his dick sucked was so obscene, so reckless, he had required so much courage that he had blown his own mind. His style of kissing was aggressive, rhythmic, as though he had studied a manual. His jaw was narrow and angular, his chin a lame afterthought. His skin was evenly toned and well moistured, smoother than mine even. He barely had to shave. He always smelled like a department store. If I had met him now, I would have assumed that he was gay. But at least Trevor had the sincere arrogance to back up his bravado. He didn't cower in the face of his own ambition, like those hipsters. And he knew how to manipulate me. I had to respect him for that at least, however much I hated him for it. Howling with laughter the first time I heard that in the car. Just dying of laughter. You know, I think that one thing, so this is a book that it's a character book. It's a character piece. I watched a few interviews with Otessa Moshfegh, and she talks about how the origin of the book was the character coming up with the character, writing in this character's voice, and then the plot and all of that came secondary to this character, which is cool. I have dabbled in doing that in college, but generally speaking, that is not the way that I write, which is cool. I like that, but it did inspire me to try and maybe dip my toes in doing something like that. Now, this novel also has something that I have a particular soft spot for, which is unnamed first-person narration. My novel that I wrote has an unnamed first-person narrator. I just love this character so much. She is so full. She is such a full person. She just, like, it is very, I find very rare that you find a character who has this much depth to them. Just feels like they contain so much within them. There is, every word is obscuring 100 more that are lurking below the surface about this character. The plot here is largely not the point. I mean, you kind of know the whole plot just up front with the title and the blurb on the back. Like, she's gonna basically sleep for a whole year and not go outside unless she really has to. And that is what happens, I think that it reminds me of, I have this friend who he started Twin Peaks but never watched a lot of it. And a couple times he has said to me how he was like, yeah, I've never bothered watching all of it because I already know who killed Laura Palmer. I found out who killed Laura Palmer. So, like, what's the point in watching it if you already know? Which is, like, I love him, but it is a very juvenile kind of way of understanding how stories work. And particularly that story. But, so, like, you at the beginning of the book that this is gonna, she's gonna have this year of rest and relaxation. The other thing that the book makes clear, so up front that this is a year, 1 year, there's gonna be 1 year of rest and relaxation, and right at the beginning of the book, page 3, It says, I started hibernating as best as I could in the mid-June of 2000 in Manhattan. So, the klaxons sound at the outset of the book. You say, okay, well, we know where this is going to end, such a wild. I as a writer, it is very hard to pull that off, to show your hand up front and still stick the landing when you get there. I don't know if I can do that. That is some serious chops, pulling that off. And even though I knew what was going to happen, I knew that was going to happen, and then there's another thing that happens, half or 2/3 of the way through the book, where you go, oh no. And then you know that a bad thing is going to happen. And then it does, and that's how the book ends. It's still really, really, really affected me. I don't know. I can't think of a time that I have been as, cried at the level that I did finishing this book since the last Harry Potter book came out. When I was in it was the summer before my senior year of high school when that came out. So it was a long time ago, 15 years ago. Now that, of course, there's mitigating circumstances in why that is happening. That is not necessarily to say that this book is more emotionally evocative or whatever than other great books that I've read. It just, there was, I think that of course, when you learn creative writing, we learn about the idea of the ideal reader, right? Every text has a perfect person, a perfect place, a perfect time, a perfect set of circumstances that can align to impart incredible meaning to the work. And not just books, all art is this way. I was joking with a friend of mine not that long ago. We were talking about, 2000s, early 2000s, in late 90s, kind of hard rock, butt rock music. And I brought up a personal favorite of mine, which is the song Fine Again by Seether. Which, I love that song, but it's maybe, I would say, kind of a simple song. It feels like the essence of the frustrated, vacillating emotions of a hormonal teenager, which is why it's weird, because it's like a man in his mid-20s who is performing the song. But I was relating how I had that song stuck in my head for a long time a while back, and then I was watching the music video for it on YouTube, which is a very funny music video, where all of these people are holding up signs that say, their shame or whatever about themselves. And there's a comment on the video that was like, this is my favorite song of all time. I've never heard a song that is more meaningful to me than this song is. I always think of the morning I had to go to rehab, and I was like ready to kill myself, and I couldn't imagine life being worth living ever again, and I was in the back of a car like DTing and throwing up all over myself, and this song came on the radio, and I'll always hold on to that memory because that was my bottom, and I will never be that low again, and blah. And it, everything has that. Someone has that for everything, you know? And this book was just one of those instances for me. Just, it was the right book at the right time in a huge way for me. So, I have talked a bit. If you've been watching my long and rambling videos for this last year that I've been making them, you know that I had a very long period of pretty severe depression, mental illness struggles, and varying struggles of varying mental illnesses. And then a number of traumatic things that happened in my life. I was in, so like I had been falling into pretty severe struggles with binge eating in the later half of the 2010s. And my depression was extremely bad. I was extremely dissociated. I was numbing in ways that were very severe. I was losing my ability to maintain interpersonal relationships in my life because I was so distant, so removed, so numb, so dissociated that I couldn't maintain my end of the social contract of friendships. My marriage was falling apart because of this. All sorts, just everything was going wrong for me, basically. And I did start getting help, going to, I went to treatment for the eating disorder stuff. I went to treatment for depression stuff. Was in various group programs of varying levels of intensity and institutionalization. And I set out on this quest in 2018. I was like, I'm gonna turn my life around. So I went to treatment. I decided I was gonna quit my job at the bookstore. That was kind of a real dead end, very low ceiling kind of lifestyle that I was living. I went to school to learn how to do computer programming, and I was like, I'm going to have a career, I'm going to make money, I'm going to have a middle class life, all of these things, I'm going to make it happen. At that time, then my former partner, who is in recovery, relapsed. And that became a major problem in my life. And then when I did do the school thing, it didn't pan out the way that I wanted it to at the time. I think that if I had the skills and time to heal that I have now, I could have probably persevered through that patch of time. But instead, things just started disintegrating very rapidly. I had to go to the hospital, things like that. Things were getting out of control pretty quickly. And then, I didn't find work. I was unemployed. I had taken out, all of this debt. My marriage was just like really on the rocks. And then in December of 2020, my wife left me. She asked me for a divorce. And we, at the time, were living in our friend's basement. And so I had to move out because I could move here to my parents' house. And she did not have a place where she could move easily. So she stayed and I left. And then, 6 weeks after that, the pandemic started. And so, I kind of wandered home to where I grew up, and I was in this very intense daze, this very severe. I'm very good at leaving myself, at discorporating completely, and so that's pretty much what I did. I don't remember almost anything from then, that period of time. It's very hazy. It is truly dreamlike to try and recall that period. And then the thing was that, when the pandemic started, and I had this excuse. I didn't have to do anything. I didn't have to get my shit together. I didn't have to figure anything out because everybody had to stay home. Everything was shut down. Everything had to stop, So I just kept checking out. There was a period of time where I didn't physically go outside for over a month. Many days where I didn't leave my bed except to go to the bathroom and eat. Just laid in bed for, 22, 23 hours a day. I would do things like stay up for 50 hours and then sleep for like 25. I was taking trazodone. Sometimes I would just be so miserable that I didn't want to be awake anymore, so I would just take a bunch of trazodone and knock myself out. It was a truly wild experience. And I did all of these things knowing in a way where it was like I knew it, I thought it, but I couldn't say it out loud. Where I was like, I just have to do this now because this is bubble wrap for my life. And like, I'm not really living my life, but I'm not ending it either. So let's just kind of see how this goes for now. And it was like around the time that I started this channel talking about books, shortly before that, when I was getting back into reading again, that was when things started to really kind of like, the veil started to lift. It didn't get all the way there to the point where I was like, oh my god, I feel like I'm coming alive again and I'm like a person, until, I don't know, late summer last year, 9 months ago. But yeah, so it was like a year and a half or so that I spent from when I came here to this house, to this town, until I kind of started to wake up again. So, you can imagine then how this story of a woman who finds that, she doesn't want to die, So she sleeps. She finds a psychiatrist in the phone book who just so happens to be the worst psychiatrist in the history of psychiatry, who will prescribe her every downer and tranquilizer and, you know, if Quaaludes had still been legal and available in the year 2000, I'm sure she would have gotten those too. And then in one drug that I think is probably not real, called Infirmitorol, I believe it was called. And then she can just take these cocktails of drugs and just sleep. And it just keeps getting worse and worse. And the idea that she eventually reaches, she formulates this theory that if she can sleep truly deeply, rest truly deeply, if she can be satiated in this rest, that she can wake up as a new person. She can effectively kill her previous self and be reborn as someone new and different, who is no longer plagued by what she mockingly called existential ennui, right? And I was not explicit in my... I didn't plan it this way. I basically just sort of was like, I just need to keep doing this and hoping that it gets better. But effectively, we did the same thing, the two of us. We did the same thing. We reached the same conclusions. And for both of us, it worked somehow. And that really, it really did something for me in a really big way. You know, when you've got a first-person book like this, I think that the prose quality will often be overshadowed by the voice, strength of the voice. I don't think that this is an exception to that rule. I do think that one thing that people don't think of is that, like, of course, beautiful, dense, flowery, you know, impressive prose is great and good. I am a guy who likes David Foster Wallace, right? And so, like, I obviously am, you know, wooed by these sorts of things, but I think that I am more wooed by voice, by strong voice and character, and that's why I love first person. I almost exclusively have written fiction in first person. I just find it to be more interesting that way, and I think that people undervalue how skilled you have to be to do first person voice really well. And this is that. Very much so. This is one of my favorite things that I've ever read. You know, I genuinely was just giddy to experience this. I was insatiable for this, and I went and I bought all of her other books. She's got her new book is coming out soon. I'm gonna fucking buy that too when it comes out. I haven't started either. Her other two novels. I haven't started either of them yet, but I'm going to, and I want to. So, yeah, this is insane. This is so good. Um, yeah. Thanks for watching, as always. And, you know, if you watched my previous video about John Darnielle and Jeffrey Eugenides, then you saw my ramble about, making, when you make these I make these videos, I'm talking about myself and how I relate to the art and why it's meaningful to me. And that does seem to resonate with people. I know that it resonates with me when other people do that, so that's, why I want to do it too. So forgive me for this, review of this book being, 20 minutes of me telling you my life story or whatever, but it, I think it's like, how do I extricate myself from this, and what's the purpose in doing so? If you wanted that, you would just read all of these blurbs, and then you would read this plot synopsis, and then you would just say, okay, I either want to read it or I don't. That's not what you're here for. That's not what you want from me. And that's not what I'm going to give you. So I respect you too much for that. I don't know what the future has in store for me or this channel, other than that I am going to try and do a Twin Cities tag video using stuff that the inspiration from Jim. That's just going to take planning, so I'll have to plan it. Alright, good night.